Hello and welcome to Thought Leader Magazine. I'm your host, Chris Carr. This is episode 33. And today we have Mr. Doug MacGray. Doug is the president of Stonecrop Wealth Advisors. Doug, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So listen, want to dive into your business and talk a little bit about what you're building and the things that you've been doing. But before we get into that, tell me a little bit about how your business is we're almost on the other side of COVID, we hope. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
did the world just get turned upside down on you? What happened?
Well, we realize it's turned a lot of companies around for the negative, and some companies it's helped. For us, it's actually been a net positive for a number of reasons. First of all, we kind of restarted our company April 1. We pulled away from an existing partnership, pulled our client base out and started a new company on April 1. So in that April 1 of 2020. So in that transition, while getting everything ready, I was in discussions with another company about potentially getting some space to share. And as April 1 got closer, it seemed more and more clear that wouldn't be a wise idea. We need to not sign the lease. So you're looking at my office. I had all my employees set up to be remote anyway, if they needed to be. And so we just stayed that way. So we were already remote for a few months leading up to April 1, and it's worked out great. The market obviously had a really tough time right as we were getting started, but then it's been pretty cooperative since then. And our clients have really adjusted very well to remote meetings, and almost to the point where it's been a net positive because we can meet with them more often.
Mhm.
And so it seems like that's gone well. I definitely want the face-to-face to come back. But it's worked out really well for us.
Yeah, that's great. So you have this new company you're starting. You've been in the game forever, but you have this new company that's starting, and then all of a sudden, it's like COVID hits, and it's just like, oh, on top of everything else, now just try to build this business around a global pandemic.
Well, that's right. I mean, I have, I was doing everything to get this company started, and Chris, you've started your own company. All the things that go into that, all the projections you have to prepare, all the moving pieces that you have to get right, and so it was quite busy. And with the projections I did, I made sure I'm going to be conservative as far as what's going to happen. Fortunately, COVID didn't really hurt us financially initially a little bit. But it has all worked out, but it wasn't one of the things I was expecting. And of course, it caused a little more angst than normally would happen. But the last time I started a company was with three partners, and it was December 1, 2008. So I have a real penchant for starting companies at the wrong time.
Yeah, I started mine literally right after 9/11. I was working at Vanguard, and I just got into the IT division, and they were like saying, hey, you know what? Our phones will not stop blowing up. We're going to need to push you back to the phones. And I had already started Faratech, and it was the worst thing happened. It's the
Right.
worst, greatest thing that
Right.
ever happened. I made the leap. The rest is history. But I went from 2001, then survived 2008.
Yep.
I survived the pandemic, and I had this weird
Right.
thing where I had a client. They were $1 million client that left us in 2013, and I had hired a zoo of new employees.
Right.
And ironically, out of all those meltdowns, that was actually the hardest thing. Is just that I didn't take
Sure.
someone's advice and had a client that was 40 to 50% of my income.
Right.
And I don't know. I tried to sell my way out of it and tried not to do layoffs, and it took 3 years of pain and suffering to get through it. But
Yeah, and some sleepless nights, I'm
oh
sure.
my goodness. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. I had a 1-year-old. And yeah.
Well,
So
I remember years ago when I started my first business, and I had my first little downturn, and there was an older business owner next door who came into my office, sat down, and said, "No one knows what it's like to run a business till you sweat and payroll."
yes.
And He's
Yeah.
right. I mean, that's when you learn what running a business is like.
You are not kidding. You are
Yeah,
not kidding. Like I've been doing this for, you know, 20 years and I
right.
still get kidney stones twice a month. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, let's dive in, talk a little bit about Stonecrop. We talk about what, we casually call it the three pegs. Unpack that. I mean, obviously there's a wealth advisor on every corner. What
Right.
makes you different? What's your three pegs? What does that mean?
Well, we purposefully set out our mission statement to say that, first of all, it's client focused. So our clients um, uh, see the objectives, find the path, and navigate past the obstacles for a more prosperous future. So the more prosperous future is the ultimate goal. We want every client to be better off for having worked with us. So what are those three pegs? It's the find the path, and navigate past the obstacles. And what we in working in this industry for a long time, one of the things I pretty much have come to understand is that with every financial advisor you talk about, I would say roughly half of them are really good at that middle part, the find the path. And the find the path is create the financial plan.
Hmm.
With all the tools that are out there, it's not real difficult. And if you get a certified financial planning designation or get a little bit of expertise, putting together a good financial plan is something that most decent financial planning shops will get good at and are good at.
Hmm.
Uh, and so to be good at that maybe makes you a little bit above average. The part where we spent a lot of time the last 6 or 7 years was the navigate past the obstacles. And what that means is executing the plan. It's great to have a plan, but if you're not changing any behaviors or doing anything to actually achieve it, then you meet with a client again in a year or so, and nothing much has happened. And so you're not really improving their lives a whole lot, somewhat.
Sure.
So we've spent a lot of time on that. And so that's the third peg. But the first peg is the one that really probably distinguishes us the most, and that's to see the objective. We spend a significant amount of time upfront and otherwise talking about what their true objectives are, getting to know them. What's your story?
Hmm.
What's your past look like? What's your current look like? And what is it you really want to accomplish? Most financial planning shops just kind of the client walks in. It's like, what year do you want to retire, and do you want to educate your kids? And that's great, but there's a lot more to it, and that's a dynamic process that doesn't happen all at once. You get to know clients over a period of time, and they begin to open up over time. But we make a concerted effort to make sure that conversation starts right away.
Yeah. And how do you do that original questionnaire so it doesn't feel so cookie cutter?
Well, we don't send a questionnaire.
I mean,
Uh,
yeah, you know what I mean? Like
yeah, but how do
yeah.
you ask the questions? Yeah, we basically our first meeting is called "See the Objective" meeting.
Mhm.
We kind of bandied around a bit. What do we call that? And since our mission statement says our clients see the objective, we said, well, let's just call it "See the Objective" meeting. So what we're telling clients with that meeting is, don't bring anything.
Yeah.
We may get into asking some questions about your finances, but it's mostly going to be about who you are. So, in other words, where are you from? What was money like for you growing up? Were you wealthy? Were you poor? Were you, all these things? What have been your good experiences with finances, bad experiences? Have you had a financial advisor? How did that go? Because some clients walk in very wounded from prior financial advisors.
Sure.
And ultimately, what's important to you? One of the key questions we tend to ask towards the end of every one of these meetings is, how do you want to leave a mark on life? Which is a great conversation starter and opener. We learn a lot about what the clients are about by just asking that question. We don't ask that one first. We ask a whole bunch of questions leading up to it, and then we ask questions like that just to get a
Mhm.
really good idea as to who they are and what they want to do, because that opens up everything. Because what we need to see is the past history and where they are now, because then we want to kind of map out the next 10 or 20 years and figure out what are the transitions going to be in their lives.
Yeah.
Because whether they have lofty goals or not, they are going to have life transitions, and we want to make sure we're preparing them for those. So that first meeting is a broad-based, wide-open meeting. We're just asking questions. The client's doing a lot of the talking, and it's one where we actively listen. So we don't just ask a list of questions. We more or less have themes, and we ask questions based on those themes. And if they ask a question that engenders another question, we'll ask another one. So it's really to get to know them so that we can begin to unwind and unpack what will really make them happy in life, because that's where we want to steer them.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So you're doing a lot of so that's part number one. What's part number two? I mean, obviously you went through all three, but
Right.
part number two is
Part number two is the
Yep, that's where a lot of the wealth managers, wealth advisors do really well. But what do you do differently that makes you kind of one peg higher, one step higher?
Well, first and foremost is that we're better prepared for that part of it, because we know we're much better. We know their objectives much better. We know their family situation better. We know what they're going to be up against. So we know those details ahead of time. Instead of a client just spitting out, "I want to retire when I'm 62." We have already mapped out. Okay, that's fine. You want to retire at 62, but you also want to upgrade your kitchen, and you want to go on all these different things. We've figured that out now.
Yeah.
So when we're doing the specific fact finding, what's your net worth? What's your 401k statement? What is your house worth? What's your mortgage? What's the interest rate? All those things. When we're getting all those details, they have a much better context. So the plan we're putting together is tied to much more specific and useful and constructive context. The financial planning software and the technical knowledge is going to be similar across financial planning companies, but because we've done the hard work of getting to know them better, the plan is going to be more robust.
Yeah, and I've seen some of the work that you've done, and just the tools that you're doing to visualize it. I think it really matters how you adopt not only your process, but also the technology that you use when you marry them together, as opposed to it just feeling like it's an isolated piece of software. I feel like when you marry the two together, you're going to get a significantly better outcome than, I don't know, just one of these things where just even Vanguard itself. Like, I think what happens is that people can make it very simplistic, when, to tell you the truth,
Right.
is if it was that simple, everybody would do it, and you wouldn't have a place in the world. But I think the longer I've been studying this industry, it's just like, if that was so, we would be we'd
Right.
be having very different conversations.
Yeah, and I could spend, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes with you and ask you a few questions, and then run to my software and create a 120-page report with a lot of pretty graphs and stuff like that. It would look impressive, but because I haven't done the hard work of really getting to know you, it's not that. So the outcome, the pretty book or whatever, has become so much less important, because people are realizing, and certainly we've realized, that financial planning is dynamic. It's not throw a book down in front of someone and say, "Look how many pages we were able to print," and the colors. Some of that stuff can be important because you want to portray, a message. But we don't in this right now, we're doing mostly by PDFs, or just showing them the screen and saying, "This is what it looks like." And sometimes that even works better, because they say, "Well, I'm really not spending $60,000 a year. It's more like 70,000. We plug in the extra 10,000. Oh, look what that does. You're still okay." So it's it's the flexibility and the dynamic aspects of the planning that are married really to the hard work of getting to know the client.
Yep. Now, phase three, a peg three.
Yeah.
Unpack that one more time.
That's the execution of the plan. And again, if you're in this business, you understand that you can put the best plan in front of a client, the most detailed plan. So these are the 18 things you need to do, and if you do, you'll succeed. And then realize, if you meet with them again in a year, 6 months, 2 years, whatever, they won't have done it. They came to you because they wanted help. They didn't just want, "This is what you're not doing." And so we have, between my staff, myself, our online tools, and a variety of other things. There are things that the client, we usually have a list of action items. This is what you're going to do. This is what we're going to do. And we make sure that we follow up with them, and we make sure we provide them with the tools to do it. Anything from a client that really needs help budgeting, we can help them with budgeting and all of that, to making sure that if they said, they're going to save $5,000 this year in this particular account, we'll either do the auto draft or just check in with them in 6 months and say, how are you doing? Or whatever, if they said they're going to get their will done, do you have an attorney? No, let us find one for you. And even if they want us to make the appointment for them, we'll do whatever it takes to make sure that all those things are getting done. And over time, they start to develop better habits. So we're making sure that plan gets done. And if it's clear we're running up against great resistance in certain areas, we shift somewhere else. Oftentimes we'll say, based upon what you've told us, you can save $5,000 this year. And at the end of the year, they didn't save $5,000. And we say, well, where's the money? And then we realize over and over again, they're really spending that $5,000. So we need to increase their lifestyle budget by that $5,000 and then stop assuming they're going to save it, because they're not. Or we give them the tough love and say, if you're not saving that money, then you need to retire 2 years later or whatever. But
the ripple effect of these.
Right.
Yeah. So, where do you find, you've been doing this for so long, it's just, do you find that so much of it is in the consistent accountability?
Yes. And a lot of it just happens by hiring a financial advisor. Because now you have someone. It's like, Chris, if you have a board of directors and you're going to see them every quarter, just that dynamic creates a better accountability structure for you, because boy, I'm going to have to report these numbers. So it's similar with a financial planning advisory relationship. Now they know, boy, if I don't save that money the way I said I was going to save that money, I'm going to be a little embarrassed. It doesn't always work, but that step alone does help clients to do to improve their habits. And that's one of the reasons why people hire financial advisors in the first place, and one of the reasons they should. So there's certainly an accountability, but we try to step it up a little bit and make sure that it's not just a passive accountability, but that it's a proactive accountability. Everything from having hard conversations with clients if they are spending too much and they don't seem to want to be coming to admit it. They have goals that are not attainable, all the way to people who have way more money than they need for their goals, and they need to come to grips with that and figure out, well, what does that mean? Do I retire sooner? Do I give away money? Do I spend more money? Am I just okay with that? So there's a lot that goes into that accountability, but we do it. We understand that there's some passive accountability that goes on just by hiring us, but we take it seriously to be purposefully and proactively accountability partners as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think one of the things that happens when you're talking to people like myself or others who are in a position where they want to make that step with a wealth advisor. I think one of the challenges that we have, or at least I have, is I thought I could do it on my own.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And there's this phrase I have on my business that sort of says, like, if you could have done it, you would have done it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know it sounds, that's a little bit fatalistic, but it's just like, it's 3 years now and you still haven't done it, but you're like, oh, it's on my list. I'm like, you know what? That list is never going to happen. Like, I know that you're big into charity, and I know that a lot of people will say, hey, you know what? If I want to get to a place where I'm wealthy, and once I'm wealthy, I'm going to start to be a really great giver.
Right.
And I'm like, no, you won't.
Right. Yeah. Because you always grow into it. And one of the things that we've discovered over time is, you're absolutely right. I mean, we do certain things that clients have said over and over again, I never would have done this had you not put this together. So one of the things we do, for example, is we started a seminar called What to Do with Your Stuff. And so now we do that with clients, which basically is, where do you put everything? In other words, if something were to happen, it's the thought you have when you get in an airplane. The
Yep.
airplane goes down. Will they be able to find my will? Will they be able to find everything they need to find, my passwords, all of that?
Yeah.
So we created a process where this is the index you need to have, and this is where you put everything, and this is who you show it to, and this is who should know where it is, all that stuff. And generally, that's a back burner thing that people don't do unless someone kind of pushes it on them.
Hmm.
But the other thing that what you said reminds me of is that from the get-go, when I first got into this business, I have met with people whose net worths are significantly higher than mine will ever be, or was. And the first thing that comes out of the mouths of these very successful people is, boy, I'm really embarrassed at how I've been managing my finances. So I think one of the barriers to people hiring a financial advisor, not just they don't want the accountability, but is that they're embarrassed. And the first thing I always do in those circumstances is say, you've worked very, very hard to amass these assets to get where you are, to do what you've done. And now you're making the wise decision. You've gotten to this point that you need some help. There's nothing to be embarrassed there. But it is often that embarrassment or that recognition that I've been trying to do this on my own, and maybe up to here it worked. And then the last few years it hasn't worked so well, and I finally need to get some help.
Yeah. It's funny. My wife is totally going off tangent, but I promise I'll circle back. My wife is totally into the royal family. And so this Meghan Markle interview, this Oprah Meghan Markle interview. And one of the things that was funny, because I have to sit through it too, because I love my wife, right?
Right.
And Meghan Markle was saying there's no class that teaches you how to be a princess. All the stuff that I need to do, even
Right.
knowing the English national anthem, I had to go figure out on my own. And I think what's interesting is that people even like myself, we run a business and we do all those things, and you just assume that you're going to be able to, from a life standpoint, cross all those T's and dot all those I's.
Right.
But just to keep your business afloat is a full-time job and then some.
Right.
You can wake up one day and you haven't even covered some of the most basic things in your life, but it's assumed that it has, and so you're embarrassed that you haven't.
Right. And that's one of the reasons why I always encourage people to get a financial advisor sooner rather than later, because people assume, I think largely because of the commercial culture of our business, that you don't need a financial advisor until you're about ready to retire, or maybe a couple years before, so you can get everything set up. Well, you want to at least get some financial advice early on when you get that first decent job, when you get your first 401k, and you don't know how to manage it or whatever. When you first start having questions is when you should get some idea as to what a financial advisor can do for you, and how your finances should be set up, because that's when it's great for us, because we look at it and they have decades of on their side. So in other words, if it's a 20-something or a 30-something and they're making decent money, we can help stop those bad habits or enhance their good habits to a point where they're going to be able to do so much more than they thought they were going to be able to do, and to be happier in the long term about it. Everyone's always heard your older self will thank your younger self. We like to feel like we're the ones that are helping that older self to be thankful to that younger self for making some wise decisions early on, because later on, the decisions get harder because you don't have as many levers to pull.
Yeah, yeah. And if you were honest, right? I think I know the answer to this. If you're honest, you're not talking about overhaul of habits. I'm assuming that this process is tweaks of habits, and just with perspective saying, you know what, I'm just using a budgetary thing, right? Like $5 Starbucks, no big deal. $5 Starbucks times a week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, $5 Starbucks times a month, $5 Starbucks times 5 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I know that's a very simpleton thing, right? But from Starbucks to Wawa, it's like, is it 3 vacations worth of joy? You know what I mean? Or, yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah. And yeah, we're really not in the business of forcibly getting people to make major changes in their lives. If they need to make a major change, we feel like we need to honestly and confront that and say this isn't going to work.
Yep.
But more, in the vast majority of cases, it's knowing human nature. We're trying to show them this is where you are now and this is where you're heading. This is how you can improve it. And one of the things I talk about with new clients all the time is that there's a real small minority of people who will show up in our office who have a spreadsheet with all of their expenses. And my older brother is one of them. He's an engineer.
Yeah.
And he has a spreadsheet for everything. He likes single malt scotch. He's got a spreadsheet with ratings for every single one he's ever had. He can do a budget and stick to it. The vast majority of us can't. So that's what I tell clients is that I'm working with who you are, not who I think, I'm not going to expect you to do that spreadsheet. That would drive me crazy.
Sure.
And so what we try to do is come up with tools and ways to say, you know what, you can enhance things. For a lot of people, all it is saying, look, I'm not going to tell you how to spend your money, but what I am telling you is that if you save an extra $500 a month, this is what your situation will look like 10 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can figure out how to do that, now if they need us to hold their hand, we have a tool that will show us everything they're spending. Once they enter their accounts into this particular piece of software, we can see where that money's going. We can help them categorize it. And then we can try to help them see where the bleeding is happening and say, look, this is a way that you could save some money or whatever. So if they want us to get that granular, we can. But for most clients, it doesn't need to get that granular. And we simply tell them what positive things they need to do to enhance their situation. And that's a lot easier to do. So yeah, we work with who we've got in front of us, and we try to figure out from what we know, what they're capable of doing. Some people surprise us; they're able to do more than we think they can. But we don't try to have unrealistic expectations on any of our clients.
Yeah. And so I'm assuming it turns into more like a progress, not perfection. That if I'm meeting with you once a quarter, you didn't, like it's one of those things that my wife jokes around, like I go on a different diet 3 times a year, right? And now I'm not eating like, I don't
Right.
even know, rye bread on Sundays or, whatever it is, right?
Yep.
She's like, why don't you change one little thing
Exactly.
time and then add on to that as opposed to just being like, oh, by the way,
Right. Yeah.
I'm
And
gonna run 23 miles to work.
yeah, which you'll do for a day. Yeah. For oftentimes what we find for most clients, the easiest thing to do is to say, this is how much money you need to save. And sometimes before it comes out of our mouths, they'll say, is there any way you can set it up so it automatically comes out of my account? Of course we can do that. And so for a lot of our clients, it's let's just do that because everyone's used to a 401k where $500 comes out of their they never see it. This is the next best thing. So, and for some of our clients, we can actually have it come out of their payroll. So if it's that easy to do, we'll do that for them. But there are a whole variety of things that we can do proactively to help them create new habits. But yeah, we're not trying to put people on, no carb diets or tell them, look, that you can't go to the Outer Banks every summer anymore, or whatever. We're fitting in with their lifestyle, what they can do to enhance their situation. And there's usually plenty of things we can recommend that don't involve that kind of pain.
Yeah. So it's almost like this is who you are. This is who you want to be. These are the things
Right.
that are important to you, but I'm going to work backwards to make sure that you can do them for as long as you can do them.
Right. And oftentimes, when we spend a lot of time on that see the objective type of process, they discover things through that process that they didn't realize they really wanted to do. And so oftentimes they discover with our help that, I'm spending all my time trying to achieve this, whereas this makes me so much more happy. And this is cheaper.
Yeah, sure.
So through that process, oftentimes we can lead them to a place where they're spending less money and they're happier. And we have all sorts of examples of that happening. And one of the the examples I often use for clients when they say, when can I afford to retire, before I know anything, is, I went and visited my mother when she moved down to Florida. She moved down to the Tampa area. She bought a double wide unit for $16,000. She had land rent of about $600. She had access to a couple of swimming pools, all sorts of social things going on. I went down to visit her,
Uh,
and she was, it was a great, it was great. It never snowed. Uh, and as I was visiting her, I realized if these were my lifestyle expenses, I could retire today.
yeah.
I don't want this to be my lifestyle. Nothing wrong with it.
Yep.
But if I wanted to retire, if I hated my job that much and wanted to do something else, I could. So it's not a matter of when can I retire. If someone asked me that, I could say I could retire today. I don't want to retire because I don't want that to be my lifestyle. So there's a lot more to it, and oftentimes people discover, well, I don't need to retire to a really expensive country club estate or whatever. I want to retire near where my children and grandchildren are, or I want to be on a lake, or I want to be able to do some missions work, or whatever it is. Once we discover those things that really drive them, sometimes we work backwards and say, well, it seems like these other things that you're doing aren't that important. Do we really need those? Again, it's all client driven. It's not, we're not judging or making value decisions for them, but we are at least working through it, and they come to make their own value decisions and judgments on those things.
Now, if I'm looking at, at your organization, how do I know if I'm the right fit for you? Because I'm sure that, when you start to develop your processes, there's going to be certain people that might be early in this process. I wouldn't say late in the process, but I would say might be early or might not be in a financial situation to work with someone as established as you are. I mean, you guys are, you guys are definitely having an incredible background. You have some really great success stories, and you have all that stuff. But how do I know whether I'm a good fit for you?
Well, that's not always the easiest question to answer, but I'll answer it. And one of the reasons we have a process where that see the objective meeting I'm talking about, we don't charge for that. And we don't charge for the initial part where we do the initial financial plan, because what we're trying to do is get to know each other. Because if someone hires us to manage their assets and be their financial planner, they have to look us in the eye and really trust us. Mm-hmm. We can tell them and show them all sorts of data that shows SIPC protection, all these things are protecting your money. So even if we turn out to be bad guys, your money's protected. They still need to trust. They still want to trust us.
Sure.
Because they're not going to watch every little iota of what we're doing. They want to trust that we're doing the right thing for them, and we care about them. So that's number one. Is a lot of times we go through that process, and either the client or we figure out, what, this won't work for whatever reason. But I will say, overall, it's generally people that aren't, we have a very, very robust investment management process. We have two chartered financial analysts on our investment team. We have a third who's 2/3 of his way through it. We have myself, who's been in the business for a long time. I have my CFP designation. I'm a formerly practicing attorney. So we have very highly credentialed people on our investment committee, and our investments do well. But that is not what we lead with. And if a client comes in and all they're looking for is a little bit extra or a lot extra return compared to what the S&P is doing, we don't want that client. We want a client who wants a holistic relationship, who wants their financial plan to succeed, not just get 1% over the S&P. If they come in and all they're looking for is performance, then that's generally not the client that gels well with us.
Gotcha. Now, so that is for the personal investor. Now, you also do investment work at the institutional level. What do you do there?
Yeah, we have been doing institutional work for well over a decade, about 15 years now, maybe more than that. But in any event, we work with nonprofit institutions that have money that needs to be managed. The kind of money that most people are familiar with are endowments. So like a college or a church or some other nonprofit might have some money that needs to be managed. And that money is generally perpetual in nature, meaning they want it to spew out some dollars year after year. And so we work with those nonprofit institutions. And the reason we're distinct in the institutional world is largely because of the practice I have built. I'm a formerly practicing attorney. I'm a licensed attorney. I practiced in Delaware for a while. So I did a lot of estate planning and corporate work, which is one of the corporate capital of the country, if not the world, in Delaware. And so I have that background. I had my first job was working full time for a non-for-profit in a school, and I've been on all sorts of boards of nonprofits. So I have this background. So when I first got a nonprofit client, it was a small college that had about a $10 million endowment, and we won that. And we won it largely because we didn't come in and say, we're going to beat everybody else with your investment returns. They wanted to know what we were going to do with their investments, certainly. But we were also able to help them craft their investment policy statement, to consult with them on their charter, to help them come up with a spending policy. And our distinct line of business, our niche, is anything from call it a couple $100,000 to about 50 million is is our sweet spot. And those type of institutions have been vastly underserved. The reason for that is once they get a significant amount of money, they believe, they think, oh, we got $1 million, we're big time. And they go to, I won't say any of the names, but one of the big names, and they get treated like a very small potato because they are. And we realized with the first client we got that we love these mission-based organizations. They're profitable for us, so we serve them very well on a high-end basis. And it's been such a contrast to what they've had in the past that we've never lost an institutional client, and we just love the work. So our services tend to be more proactively serving the clients and more proactively designed to meet the needs of that particular niche.
Very cool. Very cool. So about what percentage of your work is institutional?
It's about a quarter of our business.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
It's great. And so I met you through a charity called Edify.
hmm
Tell me a little bit about what how that's impacted your life, and obviously there's a faith element to what you do.
Right.
And I'm a pretty big fan of Edify. I believe that you are as well. What's it like? You're at a spot in your life, right, where you can kind of look at the full spectrum of the things that kind of
Right.
impact your life. Where's the faith element and things like Edify? Where does it fit in? How does it impact what you do and how you do it?
Well, it's the very foundation of what we do, and I'll take a step back even from Edify, because we have a mission statement, but ultimately our mission statement has a foundation to it. Meaning, I want everyone who works for our excuse me, everyone who works for our company to be motivated to serve our clients in that capacity, not because they're getting a paycheck, but because they have empathy for clients. They really want to serve them. They hurt when our clients are hurting. They're joyful when our clients are doing well. So for me, my faith instructs me, love your neighbor as yourself. And so if I'm running a business that is serving my neighbors, serving others, then I want to serve them as I would serve myself. So I want all of my employees or all of my staff or anyone who works for me to be similarly motivated, to have those same values. So in many ways, I start with the fact that in many ways, I believe my business is serving others. My business in some ways is a ministry. It's a ministry to individuals. It's a for-profit ministry, but it's a business. It's a ministry. And then from there, I want the fruits of what we do to serve as well. And I have been involved with nonprofits pretty much my entire for-profit career since I started practicing law. by being on boards and through philanthropy and things like that. Edify, I started working with personally about 6 or 7 years ago, because my very first job was teaching at a private boys' school overseas, Christian school. And since I started practicing law, I've been on all sorts of nonprofit boards. And I began to look, and this is what I tell my clients to look at their philanthropy and see if there's a theme. My theme always was education for people in really poor areas. So because I saw that as a way for them to pull themselves out of poverty. And so that's where I taught. I taught overseas. And I have been involved with charities that one way or another are helping in education. And so I went on a trip to Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic some years ago, and someone who was involved with Edify that does work in Dominican Republic recommended to me to look into them. And so I met with some people there, and they do great work in the Dominican Republic and 10 other countries in Africa and Latin America, in really impoverished areas for these schools that are doing unbelievable work. And the charity is very effective at creating sustainable institutions that are serving these children. So I'm all in. And so for our company, that's one of the charities we give to. I want to give locally too. So we give to a couple of local charities as well that are helping in Wilmington as well as Philadelphia, Wilmington, Delaware. And so that's part of the DNA of the company, is that we're always going to be giving back. And I kind of have a personal goal of how much I want the company to give away before I hang them up,
Yeah.
which is a pretty lofty number. So we'll see if we get there.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I created a program for us. It's called Grow to Give, and what that essentially means is there's this biblical concept of what's called gleaning.
Yes.
Basically, the concept of everything I get, and I don't believe it's all my own, even though on paper you would think it would be. You know what I mean? But
Right.
I just feel like there's a level of abundance. I feel like I've been blessed beyond measure, and so if I know right from the get go that not all this is mine, I know that there's always a percentage earmarked out. We've been giving to a really great organization for years and years and years, but I was turned on to Edify in the aspect of the sustainability. And it was
Right.
very funny is that I was introduced to you from there, and
Right.
it was very interesting because it was like what I felt like the things I was hearing about you were just that, you know what, you were going to bring a very level-headed approach to this thing. But what I liked about Edify is that I don't know how to describe it. Like, I've seen so many businesses that are built on very compassionate people.
Yeah.
When it gets down to the brass tacks of how to run a business, how to do the things right,
Right.
compassion only gets you so far. It's just like so much of Edify was built by business owners, right?
Right.
That we're like, I don't know, even if I took compassion out, this is what needs to get done to make real change. And
Right.
that's what I really enjoyed about Edify.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, I have been inspired by the people who run these schools, and one of the keys to their effectiveness has been COVID, because no one can go to these countries, and yet these schools are surviving, and some are even thriving through this situation because they were prepared more so than the other schools technologically and other things like that. And even if there's no technology or electricity, that they were prepared to figure it out because they've had to figure it out to survive. And so because they're not depending on our philanthropy to survive, they've survived once that that pipeline was cut off for a year and a half, or however long. So that to me was proof in the pudding that they were that their process is succeeding.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, we're near our end of our time, but I do have a couple different questions about kind of the Thought Leader magazine is kind of you, the thought leader. I think one of the things, and I'm going to use this a little bit of flattery here. I think one of the things that I've heard really where I would, if there are listeners here and they're thinking about working with Doug, is that you were subtly saying this, but when I do marketing, right, we've been doing it for almost 20 years, and I line up all the pieces I line up all the pieces for all my clients, right? And sometimes people say, well, what's the difference of why this one worked so much and this one didn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say, you know what, in a very weird way, it comes down to the client cared. It's like this wasn't something he checked off a list. He really cared from a fundamental level that his marketing sounded like him, that it told a great
Mhm.
story, that it did all that stuff. And your reputation, from what I see, is that there's probably a wealth advisor on every corner. But I think what
Mhm.
makes you guys great is that you care. And I don't know how to make that any softer, but literally, I think that those are the difference. I mean, like, why? My parents had a financial advisor that if they didn't make a change, would have, God knows where they would be,
Right.
right? But it really comes down to, hey, you know what? Like, one guy's going to care, and another one guy's going to look at this as a client. And like, I think in the final analysis, I think that's a big piece of this.
Yeah, and where it starts is, I'm the leader of this company, right? And so I have to care for for the people who work with me, and the people I lead. Because if I'm inauthentic to them, they're not going to be great with the clients.
Mhm.
And so the people that work for me have worked with me for a while. Cassie's been working with me for over a decade, well over a decade now. Logan's been working with me for 5, 6 years at this point. And so what I try to do is I start there, because ultimately the clients are being touched by everyone. Um, and we joked a little while ago. I was sitting in a meeting with before we hired you. We were sitting around in a meeting with the staff, and I said, uh, whenever I go somewhere and people ask me what I do, and I say I'm a financial advisor, it's like, oh yeah, I know a lot of those. So, the conundrum was, well, what do we say? How do we distinguish ourselves in the first sentence? And we started talking about what makes us different. And I said, well, we can't tell people we love you more than everyone else. That won't work, because then everyone will start saying that. But ultimately, that's what I'm trying to create, a place where not just Doug, but Cassie, Chad, Emily, whoever is working with us is displaying that same thing, because they do care, not because they're getting paid or it's a living or whatever. And we've been through the wars with our clients. We've had clients pass away. We have people have been through gotten diseases, all this stuff. It's an emotional roller coaster, but it's only an emotional roller coaster because we care so much about them. But that's where the reward comes in. Because with any relationship, you're only going to get the reward if you're going to risk the low points.
Mhm.
And so I feel like we're doing that. And ultimately, if you care about clients, you're going to proactively and creatively come up with ways to serve them better. And that's what I think we do. We're not perfect. And there may be some entity out there that creates better financial plans than us and has better initial meetings than us. But I think over the long haul, by focusing so much on that part of the dynamic, will keep us in good stead.
Yeah, it's kind of like the fuel, right?
Right, right.
um, all right, couple of things here because I think this is just the fun stuff. Is on a personal level, you run marathons.
I have run 4.
Yeah,
I'm not fast, but if I sign up for a marathon, it gets me up in the morning because they
yeah,
scare me.
yeah, sure,
Because
sure,
it's a good 6 month process or more to get
yeah,
ready for one of those things. So
yeah.
yeah,
And so one of the life goals you have is to do one uh, overseas, or basically not in America.
right.
Where would you like to do one?
Yeah, I'd like to do at least one. I've looked at a bunch, and the one I'm looking at right now, assuming everything opens up, would be November in Ravenna, Italy. There's a
Where's Ravenna?
Ravenna, Ravenna. It's on the East Coast in
Okay,
the north. It's known for its mosaics. It's a beautiful old,
wow,
almost everything in Italy is beautiful and old.
yeah,
But yeah, so they have a pretty cool marathon, it looks like, and it's in November, and I think the odds are pretty good that it'll be open by then for something like that. So that's beginning to get me motivated.
that's great. That's great. My wife and I went to Italy after she got out of medical school, and what's amazing about Italy is you can be in one town, you can drive to the next town, and it looks like a different world, a whole different
Right.
country, and stuff
Right.
like that.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
think what's so
Very
amazing
diverse.
about Italy is, yeah,
That's great.
yeah, that's very, very cool. So I'm gonna end with giving you, uh, you got to give you a taste of your own medicine here. So I need to ask, what kind of mark do you want to make on this life?
Uh, that's great. What kind of mark do I? Well, it starts with my faith.
Yep. Notice
I
I didn't. I gave you a questionnaire before the interview, but
You didn't give me that
I
one.
didn't give you this one because
No.
this is the real deal, right?
Right. I ask clients this all the time, so I guess it's fair. It does start with faith, and I want to live a life of faith that is one where I'm continually growing and continually serving God. And I think the outgrowth of that is strong, robust, meaningful relationships. It took me a while to come to that conclusion that that's what's important in life.
Yeah.
But between family and friends and all of that, I want to make sure that I'm giving more than I'm receiving, that I'm growing something that's going to continue. One of the ways I want to leave a mark is many, many years after I stop working. I want this company to be better than it is now. I want to look at it and say, boy, that's so much better than when it was when I was running it. So right now, the biggest way I feel like I'm leaving a mark is by mentoring others, people that work for me as well as others. I just love that process at this point. You feel like after you've been in your business for a long time, you feel like after a while you've received so much from others, that you want to pay it forward and do it for others. So mentoring has become a big part of what I do. So what you teach others bears fruit 30, 40, 50 years from now, potentially. Those students where I taught in high school, right after college, are, not young men anymore. And they're, lawyers, other achievers, people in government. Some of them have done quite well, and it's humbling. But some of what they've learned, I taught them, and so that's where I want to leave a mark. I mean, it doesn't need to be fame. It doesn't need to be wealth or anything like that. I want to be wealthy in the lives of others, and I want a lot of people crying at my funeral, and laughing. So.
Very cool. So if they want to find out more from you or about Stonecrop, where would they start?
Well, they can go to our webpage, which is stonecropadvisors.com. And that's one place to go. They can email me you can see my name down there, Doug MacGray. It's D MacGray, MacGray, at stonecropadvisors.com. Or 610-628-4545. I had to pull that one out. It's only been my number for less than a year. So they can, any of those ways, they can reach out to us. And the webpage has all those numbers, including our office number, which is 610-628-0035. So yeah, any of those ways, or just go right to the webpage, and there's a way to click on a button, and that reaches out to us with an email as well.
That's great. Well, Doug, we want to thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to watching Stonecrop grow, but we're going to try to keep in touch on a regular basis to just
Sure.
saying, it's just I think it could have had a 2-hour interview, and we just could have kept talking and talking. So thank you very much for your time.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thank you.